Let's get into this college stuff. This is our first time like really diving into some of the players in the 2023 class. So I'm excited to get into it.
We kind of picked out a couple prospects. I think
Yeah.
5 of them in particular that we wanted to focus on, a little bit like polarizing or potentially confusing, really just interesting prospects that I think we all had an eye on and that we wanted to cover for our first kind of foray into this draft cycle. So those guys are Gigi Jackson, Anthony Black, Brandon Miller, and the Thompson Twins.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, because like we don't really need to talk about Wemby or Scoot. I mean, though, yeah, those two guys are a lot less polarizing. Like you mentioned, probably more important to talk about like, okay, like what should NBA teams be looking at? What should they do after we get past those two guys? So let's get into it. I thought it would be a good idea to start with Brandon Miller just because NBA Draft.net has him third in their mock. Do either of you want to take it away?
I'll get us started because it was my suggestion that we talk about Brandon Miller. Obviously, he's third on a lot of big boards right now, behind the obvious. I wanted to talk about him not just because he is like such a highly touted prospect right now, and because he's been a fast riser recently, but also because I think a lot of times we tend to want to stray away from comparisons that seem a little too easy or straightforward. But every once in a while, you come across a parallel staring you right in the face that's just so accurate and so potentially instructive. And I think this might be one of those cases. And I want to preface this by saying this is not to minimize what Brandon Miller is as a player, because we don't see very many 6'10" dudes who are 40+% three-point shooters on high volume, even in college. But the similarities to Jabari Smith are ridiculously striking, statistically, physically, and both with regards to the strengths and weaknesses. They're both elite shooters. Both, I think, similar measurables: 6'10", long arms, good, not great athletes, struggle to create from inside the arc, struggle finishing at the rim. I think that Jabari projected as a higher level defender, whereas Miller has a little bit more fluidity off the dribble. But statistically very, very similar across the board. 2-point percentage, 3-point percentage, rebounds, assists, turnovers, it's all virtually identical. And I think that with Miller, the question is whether he has a better foundation to build upon as a creator than Jabari, because he does seem to be more comfortable and more natural with the ball in his hands, and potentially has even better shooting indicators than Jabari. But I don't think that his mid-range, kind of mid-post isolation game looks quite as developed as Jabari's did last season. So I'm curious what you guys think.
I want to step in, and I like the comp, but I'd say that I think, at least from an eye test standpoint, the difference in fluidity and the difference in ball handling is pretty stark between Brandon Miller and Jabari. And I can't tell you, I can't put a measure to it. I'm not even sure there is a way really to put a measure to it. But it's just the change of direction and the handle, I think, is so much better. And I think it I think it will allow him as an NBA player to play as a wing. And I think that honestly makes him in a lot of ways a more attractive prospect. I think he can defend probably the same positions as Jabari, but I think offensively, because I truly do believe he'll be able to create a little bit more, and as he puts on strength, actually put pressure at the rim and finish at a higher percentage. I think his versatility is more present at this time, and I really do like him as a prospect. Not my number 3, but I'm definitely coming around. We have a 15 game sample size, so none of what I say will stay the same. I'm sure I'm definitely going to amend my view, but at this point, I really like him as a top 5 pick.
Yeah, I'm happy you mentioned that none of like what we're saying is even remotely set in stone, because yeah, like you said, we're only like 15 games into the season. We started conference play pretty recently. Yo, I'm gonna say something that I think will surprise both of you quite a bit, but I'm really concerned about like Brandon Miller's NBA outlook. The shooting looks really good, like in terms of like what he's produced, looks great. High volume, really high efficiency, especially at that size, looks amazing at face value. The issue is that when you start actually watching their games, he functions, they tend not to use him as a movement shooter. They use him more as like a stationary spot up shooter, which is not which I would like to see that change as the season goes on. I would like them to try to use him more as a movement shooter, coming off different screening actions and stuff like that. You see him standing in the corner or the wing a lot of times when they're running ball screens, or oftentimes he's just straight up not the primary creator in their offensive possessions. And then, like Milo said, the finishing just doesn't look good at all. I don't think he's even shown like great flashes of really good finishing. And the midi doesn't, there's not a lot to really say about his midi too. We don't see him going to that a whole lot either. And then with regard to his handle, I actually don't think I think that like having a tight handle can be deceiving a lot of times, because his handle looks tight. He's got good control of the ball. It doesn't look like he's fumbling the ball. Like, this is something that you would see from Jabari even last year in college, where he would drive, he would experience a little bit of contact while slashing, and then he'd kind of fumble the ball sometimes, especially when going to his left. Not something you see from Brandon, but still, I don't think that his like movement skills are all that impressive either. I mean, like Milo said, he's not, he doesn't excel as an athlete. That's what I'm a little bit concerned about, just because he looks more like just a spot up shooter than anything else. And I would, I wouldn't be as harsh, I don't think, if we weren't projecting him to be a top, if, for example, NBA Draft.net wasn't projecting him to be a top 3 pick. But I think that is something that we really have to consider. And then going off the Jabari comparison, he's not the defender that Jabari is.
So I want to follow up on your hot take, and I
Yeah.
loved it, by the way. Super hot. So with these doubts you have about him as a prospect, do you think it's wrong to put him in the top 3 or even the top 5? Like, where do you, at this time, what range do you have him in?
And also, like, arguably more importantly, like, how do you project him as a player then? Like, what do you think the median outcome for him is?
Yeah, so I actually, the comp that I had for him was, and I don't know if this is a great comp either. So I'm gonna be honest, I'm a little bit surprised that you found like such a clear parallel between him and Jabari, because I don't see it as much. Just because, again, I think Jabari is clearly a better defender. He was last year. And yeah, I think that's the biggest separator. But I actually had Cam Reddish as his closest comp. And it may sound like it's not doing him justice. Because when you look at Cam Reddish's scoring efficiency in college, a lot of people hyped him up. They said, oh, he's going to figure it out in the NBA. He's going to translate really well. The 3 ball is going to come along. Not what you're seeing with Brandon. I think Brandon is going to be a really good shooter from day one in the NBA. That's not what I'm concerned about. Whereas I think people got ahead of themselves with Cam. But I just think it's a more accurate comparison because he moves a little bit more like Cam. They get the same kinds of Cam got a lot of the same kinds of shots that we're seeing Brandon get in the Alabama offense right now. And they're closer in terms of they're a little bit closer in terms of their physical profile and their defensive impact. So that's why I had that comparison.
I hear what you're saying, but I think a big difference between Cam Reddish and Brandon Miller, and something that I think makes Miller a more compelling prospect to me, is the fact that I think he can guard a big. Not that maybe Cam Reddish could at this point. He's put on some weight. He's not a weak guy, but I think Brandon Miller projects to be someone who can play. Probably never going to play as a center, barring like a sudden 40-pound weight gain. But I think he's a guy who can, playing against a 2 big lineup with maybe 1 big playing further out, like Kelly Olynyk or something. Like, I think Brandon Miller in his prime will not be bullied by Kelly Olynyk. And I know that, well, we can't really project the way that the NBA is going to go and how positions are going to change. And, even this year to last year, like things haven't evolved exactly in the way I've expected them to in terms of play style in the NBA. But I think Miller just is more versatile defensively. And as he's going to be, I believe, a 40+% 3-point shooter, that's someone who always has a place on the floor, even if he never develops that like off the bounce stuff, even if he never puts pressure on the rim. Cam Reddish is not a dude who's going to stay on the floor like for a full season or the rest of his career. I mean, I don't see Brandon Miller going down that path, even though I do hear your concerns.
I'm also optimistic about Miller. I think I'm somewhere in between your evaluations for him. I definitely think he projects as a better offensive prospect than Jabari, because of the ability to. I actually think that he has more counters than maybe you're giving him credit for, Danny. I think that it comes down to what you attribute the 2-point inefficiency to. Why is he not able to create at a high rate efficiently inside the arc? Is it his finishing? Is it his in between game? Is it his handle? And I think that for me, it's his physicality. It's his it's getting bumped off of his spots. I think that he, from a skill standpoint, he has the ability to change directions, stop on a dime. I've seen him cross guys up. I've seen him make a reactive behind the back move to, to avoid having the ball stolen. And I've seen him, stop his momentum, pivot, and hit a turnaround jumper. I've seen him stop, at the free throw line and hit a step back jumper over a tough contest. I think that the shot making ability and those instincts are there. I think the handle is at a level that I'm comfortable with, to project him to be a 20+ point per game scorer in the NBA. But I think that right now he's very, very thin. And I think that it makes it difficult for him to, like, when it comes to getting to your, when you talk about guys that can get to their spots and really manufacture mid-range looks and get to the rim and, draw contact and finish through it. Miller said this himself, that like he knows that he needs to figure out a way to score from 2-point lands, and that the number one thing for him right now is adding strength. And I think that tracks for me. That corresponds to what I see when I watch him play. And I do think that it's troubling how he disappears for long stretches offensively, and he gets relegated to standing in the corner. But I think that between his shooting adaptability, like his ability as a potential movement shooter, and the foundation as a creator, I still think that he's going to be a very high level offensive player.
Can we move on from Brandon Miller for a second? Because I think this is a logical time to shift to a player who, in some ways, I see as a bit of an opposite, not perfectly in play style, but at least in how I look at them, and that's GG Jackson. Going through trying to find a comp, and I've been seeing a lot of Pascal Siakam, and that disgusted me. I mean, it's just like, no, obviously not. He's not Pascal Siakam. I think, first of all, Pascal Siakam wasn't Pascal Siakam like when he came to the league. So we haven't really seen a player evolve the skills in I guess turn out so drastically different than what we expected. There's been a few, but Pascal's one of the more notable examples of really overachieving expectations. Anyways, GG Jackson reminds me of Perry Jones, and this might be a deep cut for some more recent NBA fans, but it's just, it looks good, but I don't believe it. Loose handle, inefficient, and I'm going to give the 15-game sample size caveat. I'm more than happy to be proven wrong. In fact, I'd love to be proven wrong, but I don't think he's efficient. He has a real healthy dose of the Anthony Edwards deciding what you're going to do before you do it at Georgia. I remember, you'd watch Anthony Edwards at Georgia, and like the physical tools would pop off the screen. It was incredible, but you could just tell that he decided, I'm going to go into my pull-up here. I'm going to go behind the back 3 times and take a step back long 2. And Anthony Edwards still has a little bit of that, but he's moved away from it and become one of the more promising young players in the league. I think GG Jackson has that same problem times 2. Obviously an impressive athlete at his size, but I just don't see it. The feel isn't there for me. And I think sometimes you don't need counting stats, and you don't need advanced stats, and you don't need to look at efficiency. You just see a player and you say, that's, he doesn't have that Joe Ingles basketball player feel. And I'm really low on him at this time. And I'll finish this rant by saying, again, I want to be proven wrong. I want more good players in the NBA. I want every prospect to pop off the screen and be, in the debate for the top 5. I don't see it with him.
I'm in a similar place, but I think that I'd offer a harder hedge because of the fact that he reclassified as a junior in high school, and he's the youngest player in this draft class. He just turned 18 years old. He's on a very strange team, let's say. A South Carolina team with almost no spacing or playmaking around him. He's tasked with creating his own shot on a lot of possessions, which is something that not a lot of 17, 18-year-olds have to do in high level, major Division I college basketball. And he's certainly shown flashes. I think that his ability to get into his mid-range package, his ability to hit some tough shots, get into his triple threat sort of isolation game, fade over either shoulder at his size has to be intriguing, regardless of his efficiency and his struggles as a decision maker. When you factor in how difficult of a position he's being put in and how much responsibility is being placed on his shoulders at the point in his development curve that he's at right now, I see a lot of room to improve. And prior to, on the efficiency, do with this what you will, but he was shooting over 37% on, I believe, 5 or almost six attempts from 3 up until like 2 games ago. And he tanked his percentage in the span of 2 games, where he shot like 0 for like 12 against, I think, Vanderbilt and Tennessee.
I just have to say, he's a 63% free throw shooter who is averaging 0.6 assists to 2.6 turnovers. Unless we see a Pascal Siakam leap, and I'm receptive to your argument that he's the youngest guy, we should cut him a little slack, fine. But unless we see an unusual leap, he's never going to be an offensive creator. And then what you're betting on is that he's going to be a stretch big, who's a high-level defender and good role player. And I'm not willing to bet that someone who I view as a low-feel guy is going to be a high-value role player. I don't see it. Sorry to... I know you're also kind of low, but sorry to just disparage him. So I'm nice guy, I'm sure. Sorry, Gigi Jackson, if you're listening. Of course you are.
No, I also, similar to how Milo is giving him the benefit of the doubt, I echo what he was saying about, the situation that he's in right now with South Carolina, them being in a crazy conference this year. And we're just now getting into the swing of conference play. So he's only going to be playing tougher teams. So I give him the benefit of the doubt a little bit there. I also, it's also crazy to me that okay, not to talk too much about Brandon Miller again, but he's actually he's already 20 years old. And I think he turns 21 in November or something. So there's something to be said about, the age gap and how Gigi just hasn't experienced as much.
He's a full 2 years younger than Brandon
Right.
and the Thompson Twins.
Right. So that's why I'm a little bit, I'm more optimistic that Gigi can make a leap that we are not necessarily expecting right now, to put it simply. And I also think that the shooting is, at least when you watch him shoot, it doesn't look too bad. He gets it off quickly. They look like sound mechanics. He's got mostly like a one motion shot from three. No like hitching or anything like that. It looks pretty good. So I want to give him credit there that I do actually think that despite his free throw shooting not being great, I do actually think that he'll end up improving his three ball. And I don't think he's ever going to turn into a really good decision maker. He hasn't even shown flashes of really good passing, and he makes really like erratic decisions, which again is partly attributable to his age and his lack of experience. But when you don't even show any flashes at all, that's when you have to be a little bit realistic. So I would rank Brandon Miller ahead of Gigi, but maybe by only a couple spots.
I'm really curious who you have in that tier immediately under Scoot then.
So this is where we get into Anthony Black, and actually
So you have Anthony Black third.
yeah, I do. Well, at least I don't know if I have him third, but I definitely have him ahead of Brandon. Definitely.
I want to hear your Anthony Black thoughts so badly now.
Yeah. So
Anthony Black.
I mean, right off the bat, and Milo and I have talked about this a good amount in the past, but there just aren't a lot of really sound decision makers in basketball these days. Like a lot of people are just like, a lot of players growing up, playing through, high school, your EYBL circuits, whatever, they're focused on like developing bags and like getting all these moves and stuff. But we want to, which Anthony seems to want to express to an extent and does have, but what we don't see as much is like just consistent good decision making. And I think that's the biggest difference between Anthony, who's not I don't know if we would classify him as a wing. He's kind of functioning as as Arkansas's point guard, so to speak. But he's a bigger guard that is honestly a pretty impressive passer. And that's not even close to something we can say about Brandon or Gigi or even the Thompson. I think that Anthony is the best passer, out of that next tier, Grady Dick, Brandon Miller, like all those guys. Not only that, but he's also a really impressive athlete. He plays above the rim. The efficiency isn't too bad right now. He's shooting really well from two. I can't remember exactly what shoot. I think he's shooting like high 40s from the field and like 32 or 33% from three, but it's not on super high volume, shooting like 72, 73% from the line. And he's a freshman. He's what, 18 years old right now. So I really like Anthony Black. I'm not sure. I know we weren't going to talk about Grady Dick. But both of those guys impressed me more than Brandon Miller and Gigi by a pretty noticeable gap. So I'd like to hear your thoughts about him, but I am hopeful about his NBA outlook.
Okay. I think that Jacob, you have a lot of thoughts about Anthony Black. So I have a pretty straightforward evaluation of him. So I'm gonna sum that up. I like Anthony Black a lot I echo a lot of the things that you said, Danny. But I come to a slightly different conclusion. 6'7" guard that can play on or off the ball, smooth operating out of the pick and roll. He likes to probe and thread the needle to the roller. He's good at hitting shooters when he gets into the teeth of the defense. Just a lot to like from a mental processing standpoint. The way that he maps the court, he's very patient as a ball handler in the half court. moves well without the ball. He knows when to cut and flow into open space, makes decisions really quickly off the catch, and defends at a high level. There's just not a lot that you could possibly critique him on. I think he's a very scalable player. The physical tools are obviously great. 6'7", long arms, really strong, stocky frame. Bodies kind of bounce off of him when he drives. He's bouncy. He gets off the ground fast. He can grab a lot of offensive rebounds, disrupts a ton of shots on the perimeter and help side. And I see him as a guy that fills a lot of gaps defensively and gives you an extra playmaking punch in a secondary or even tertiary role on offense. I think that he compares really closely to Derek White. He's like a bigger, stronger Derek White.
That was my comp. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, that was my comp.
I mean, the hair bouncing like imagery.
that contributed a little bit, but yeah, I mean, his eerily similar, honestly.
Yeah.
And I think I'm more hopeful about his ceiling.
So for me, because we haven't seen him be able to create his own shot in the mid-range, like kind of get into that in-between game, create for himself, and not like when he gets to the rim, but when he does, it's snaking the pick and roll. He doesn't break guys down off the dribble, create separation and get past people with like quickness. And I think that because the handle is a little bit rudimentary right now and the shooting is only passable, I do see an upper ceiling limiting his potential, his upside. That being said, the limitations aren't necessarily problematic so long as you have the right talent around him. Every competitive team wants guys in this archetype, in this mold, two-way connective tissue wings that can fit next to stars. And those types of players are just always in short supply. And I think he fills a market need. I think he's going to be a valuable player for a long time, especially if he becomes a high-level three-point shooter. But he's also worth more to teams that are in win now mode. And so I do see a chance that he slips out of the upper echelon of the lottery where teams are hunting for stars.
I'll jump in here, and I've been a huge fan of Anthony Black for a couple of years now. And I've always been sort of seduced by good passers. Like I love Dacian Nix as a high schooler, and sort of the Ignite stuff sobered me a little bit. But I love passers. Anthony Black's a really good passer. The comp I've been seeing a lot is Josh Giddey. I don't think that's an accurate comp. It's sort of upsetting to me that that's sort of the dominant perception. I think actually what's going to happen over the next several years is any guard above 6'5" who's a good passer is going to get compared to Josh Giddey or Dyson Daniels, depending on how he pans out. Like I think that's just this new archetype of player, because dudes who 10, 15 years ago would have been crafted into wings or bigs are now allowed to express themselves a little bit more. And we're seeing it now with young guys, and we just naturally want to lump them together. I don't think Anthony Black is the passer or the thinker of the game that Josh Giddey is. He's not as big. Josh Giddey's massive. Anthony Black is not as big, but he is, his size is great. The reason I love Anthony Black, and this is something that I really didn't realize fully until I started watching him at Arkansas, is that he's a sure thing. It's the defensive piece, it's the passing, it's the decision making. A better shooter than I thought he would be. I think he'll be like you said, I think he'll be a passable shooter. I think he's a better player than Derek White because of the passing. Derek White's a good passer, but Anthony Black is a more creative passer. He is not going to be a bad player in the NBA. And he's young. I mean, he's not doing his fifth year like Derek White, coming after 2 years at D3, 2 years at D2 actually. Like, This is a young dude who knows how he's going to evolve as a shooter. What if he becomes a 40% shooter? Like that's a really good player.
I actually think he has a shot at it, and it's cool to see that the release and like the the mechanics themselves actually don't look bad. It's just he kind of he lifts the ball slowly, which I don't think is a very hard thing to correct. Whereas I think it's just it's harder to become a better athlete once you're in the NBA. It's I think it's harder to improve your decision making once you get to the league. Like now it's just we've gotten to a point with shooting where it's so heavily emphasized. I'm not concerned about like his efficiency right now. It looks good, and I think the lift is not that hard to correct, and the difference between him and Derek White is that he does look like a better athlete. He you'll see him playing above the rim in transition, in the half court if he's got like a wide open baseline drive or something like that. He can do that. So yeah, like you said, Jake, sure thing. And I think he's got a good amount of potential too.
I want to say that there's something to be said for players whose creativity really shines through at the college level. College offenses, defense, the game is not as like stodgy as I think it's perceived to be by some. Like it is more modern and up tempo than NCAA haters will have you believe, but it's certainly not as wide open as the NBA or as chaotic as OTE, which by the way I have a rant about. So to see a player who within like a system, a game that is occasionally restrictive, show signs of brilliance, it just makes me smile. And it's why I think, going to college and playing college basketball is not like this. I think some people have come to believe that going the college basketball route, and I think now they get paid, so it's sort of changed, but I think there's this perception that it's just like the conservative choice, and that if you're really about yourself as a prospect and you're really all about, that next step in the NBA, that it's sort of, not the most progressive choice to make. And I really push back against that, because I think, if someone thrives in college, especially at the high major level, it's still the best sign.
I agree. I actually think that you have the best, like out of any non-NBA route for a prospect to take, you have the highest level athletes that you're competing against if you go high major in college. Better than what you're, maybe better than what you'd get in the G League, better than what you'd get, certainly better than OTE, probably better than international, and you get the opportunity to play with the spotlight on you in games that matter, that you're invested in, that the fans are invested in, and there's actual real pressure and stakes. And I think that there's something to be said for that. I don't think that Anthony Black is the level of passer that I don't see Anthony Black as a primary. At the same time, I don't see any way for Anthony Black to fail as an NBA player. I think the mechanics on his jump shot are fine. I think that he will be, a mid to high 30% 3-point shooter in the NBA. And he's like a full 3 inches taller, bigger, stronger, more athletic than Derek White, with the exact same skill set and even better feel and passing.
Yeah,
he's one of the safest picks in the draft.
That was a perfect way to describe it.
Can we move on to the Thompson twins for a second? Because Danny said, and I agree with you, by the way, but I don't know if everyone would. You said that Anthony Black is the best passer out of that crop of dudes after Wembanyama and Scoot.
Mhm.
And I think there's some, and I wouldn't necessarily believe or give this person much credit, it would be like, Amen Thompson's a much better creator, at least because of his explosiveness as an athlete, and he makes high level passes. So yeah, Anthony Black might be a slightly better decision maker, but I want the ball in Amen Thompson's hands as the engine of my offense. First of all, I already said it. I hate OTE. I think it's like just capitalizing on clout and leading a lot of kids astray. And the sooner it dies, the better. And it's honestly kind of upsetting that the Thompson Twins are probably going to prop them up for like the next couple of years, because they'll probably be pretty good in the NBA. And that's a success story. But what do you have to say to people who, or I guess, what is your perspective, and this is a question to both of you, on Amen Thompson's projection as a primary creator?
I'm not sold on Amen Thompson. I actually think that he has a bit of a problematic growth curve as a player, and a problematic archetype, certainly in the modern NBA. I don't think that we've seen it. If you're projecting him as, and I think that he is, ranked, if you take an average across all of the major publications and scouts who put out their big boards, he's probably ranked as higher than Brandon Miller on average. He's probably the most common number 3. If you pick Amen Thompson number 3, I see that as you're staking your flag in the ground that this is a franchise player. This is your primary. This is a guy who you are going to run, who you are really going to run your offense through. And he's going to be, like you said, the engine. We just have never seen a heliocentric offense or a high level offense run through a player who is a complete non-shooter, like a low 20s guy who is not, in OTE, they sag off probably like 3 to 5. Like the way they sag off of him is the way that Derek Fisher sagged off of Rajon Rondo in the 2010 finals. Like they don't care. They're daring him to shoot. It's like they play Amen Thompson the way people play Ben Simmons, except he's not a screener. He's not a screener. He's not a roller. You can't use him as a center. And I think
let's see about that. I'm not so sure. Like,
so is that how you would? I think there's a lot to like.
Plot twist.
I think there's a lot to like about Amen. I think that obviously he is kind of the flashier, the more like maybe the more aesthetically appealing for some of the Twins because of how ridiculously explosive and shifty he is with the ball, and how he can just teleport to the rim, get past anybody. And it's very rare to see an athlete of that caliber, especially who's 6'7", with that type of speed, burst, and leaping ability, and kind of acrobatic finishing and passing. But his shot needs a complete overhaul. It's more broken than like just any shot that I've seen. And I think that it's problematic to think about him as a secondary. Like, how does he slot next to other ball handlers? How does that work when you have other great offensive players next to him that need space to operate, and to get into their offense? I have a hard time envisioning that, and that's why I actually am higher on Ausar.
I think Amen I have not seen a better athlete, I would say. Maybe I've seen comparable athletes, but I have not seen a better athlete. His combination of like powerful torque and agility and like dexterity is so just mind-boggling at times. I just don't see him failing. Like, I just think when you are that level of athlete, when you are an all-time athlete, you're going to figure it out one way or the other. And whether that's him being the Bruce Brown guard in the dunker spot, which is probably a more likely outcome for Ausar. No, because Ausar can, I'm more encouraged by the shooting as well. But I think Amen will find a way to be an impact player no matter what. He's playing in the super crappy OTE. I'm having a hard time taking anything from a lot of what I've seen, but I know for a fact he's one of the best athletes I've ever seen. Basketball's a sport. It's good to be a good athlete. I think we shouldn't overthink it too much. But we also should not allow our perception of how he plays against the or is he on the City Reapers, whatever the hell their team's name is. We shouldn't allow that to influence us too much. Danny, what do you think?
Yeah, I echo what you just said. Yeah, we can't get a ton from watching OTE basketball, to be honest. They honestly look like really, well, no shit, they look like really similar players because they're identical twins. I don't know if they're all that different. Similar to how like Marcus Morris and Markieff, I mean, Marcus showed, I think if you were to kind of make a parallel, like Amen is like is equivalent to Marcus, how, you know, Marcus is a little bit more assertive than Markieff, and you know, you could say Markieff adds a little bit more value on defense because he's, I think, a little bit better on defense. But the comp that I had for Amen, and I guess also Ausar to an extent, was KPJ. And I think that, like what Milo was saying about how it doesn't make a lot of sense to pick him as, you know, in the top three, just because like he doesn't have the making of like a franchise player, even though like a lot of the flashes that you see from him you would maybe associate with franchise cornerstone, somebody that you can run your offense around.
I have to interject because I don't want it to sound like I'm just completely trashing on Amen. I think that he's actually a much better passer than Anthony Black. I do. I think that he projects.
Really?
I think that it would be more effective to utilize Amen as a high volume offensive creator right now at this stage than Anthony Black. But
I
don't agree with that.
I know. But I think that like you have to show me, like, because I don't think that I still don't think that it's a strategically wise decision to try and formulate a heliocentric offense around the men.
But you shouldn't be
possible.
You shouldn't be forming a heliocentric offense around anyone, as far as I'm concerned. Like, unless you have a dude who's going to be a top 10 player of all time, like Luka, and even then we're seeing the limitations of that. Like, I don't think you should ever draft with an eye towards building a heliocentric offense.
Well, let's temper the definition that we're using of heliocentric.
Okay.
I just need a high volume offensive creator. Like
I don't heliocentric, regardless of whether we're taking it to like its extreme. Like, I know I actually, the Luka thing, that was a little bit of a bad faith comparison to make, because like that's pretty unprecedented. Not entirely, but it's a more recent phenomenon.
But other than Harden, it pretty much is unprecedented.
Yeah. And when you say heliocentric, though, you are implying that he is the sun around which the other planets orbit. And in an ideal world, you don't need to have Amen Thompson be that player. I don't think any team is drafting saying this is our sun, unless you're drafting drafting Cade or drafting Luka or drafting someone who you think is like going to be a really good scorer and an elite decision maker. You're just looking for somebody when you're drafting a creator, you're just looking for somebody to like put pressure on the rim and make smart passes. And I think he can do that, first of all. And I also I'd be devastated if I didn't commend Danny on his cross twin comparison. That was elite rhetoric, the Morris brother comparison. So thank you for that. But I mean, what's Milo?
Well,
What is separating Amen Thompson? What is keeping Amen Thompson from being Russell Westbrook?
Well, Russell Westbrook was at least in his prime, right? And for the better part of the first half of his career, he was at least an effective, well, he was around an 83% free throw shooter. He had an effective free throw line pull-up jumper. He wasn't a complete non-factor as a jump, as a scorer outside of the restricted area. I mean, that's more of a recent development. His shot really regressed as he aged, but it wasn't always that way. And that question is a bit telling to me, because I mean, yeah, there's nothing, even if I granted you that there's nothing stopping him from being Russell Westbrook, would that bode well for his outlook?
Not for you.
No, well, not for me. I don't think, well, I just don't see how, like, you have to show me the comparison to an equivalent shooter who, like, it would be, all I'm saying here is that it would be unprecedented if he were a winning player. It would be unprecedented.
But show me a comparison, period.
It would be an unprecedented situation if he didn't completely overhaul his jump shot and become as an adequate shooter, for him to be a relatively high volume offensive player on a winning championship level offense.
But give me a comp, period. Like, give
How
me
do you
failed.
How do you like
I didn't hear that
Jake
because
comparison?
we're talking over each other.
Sorry.
Sorry. How do you? Well, Jake was asking about a comp. So how do you guys feel about the KPJ comp?
KPJ is a good athlete. He's not nearly the level of athlete that the Thompson twins are. I mean, KPJ is an impressive vertical leaper, but I think it's the torque piece of it. I can't get away from the torque piece of it. And honestly, when you see their shot blocking, when you see them as lob threats, like, they're both legitimate lob threats, which is crazy. I mean, not that crazy. They're 6'7" and long, but like, KPJ is a really good athlete. I think it's a little bit different.
I guess I see him as kind of like a 76ers Iguodala. I see him as a bit similar to Iggy with, maybe actually, if you go back and watch the way that Iggy played on some of those like Allen Iverson teams and a bit later, there's similarities between the size, the athleticism, the explosiveness, the lack of a reliable jump shot, but obviously the playmaking and defensive impact. I think, like, for him to, but we didn't see that iteration of Iggy like really contribute to a championship level team, and whether he could have, that's an open conversation. But again, that's the point that I'm making, is that it would be unusual. We haven't seen it before. But I think that he could be in a more limited role. I think that he could be very effective if he is able to, do something with the jumper. Not to say that it's impossible to, but the mechanics are broken. But I think that he might have been born into the wrong era. I think that in the 2000s, in the 90s, he could have been an extremely impactful player on a high level team. I think that, like, we have reached a point where shooting is so important, and it's so emphasized, and it's so crucial to the complexion of your impact and the role that you're able to fulfill on an NBA roster, that it's just difficult to imagine how that's going to look. You guys both indicated that you think that they're pretty darn similar. I think there's the similarities are obviously striking. They're identical twins. They have the same genetic template. They're probably the most talented identical twin prospects we've ever seen. Not probably, they are.
Yeah.
By the way, have you noticed the numbers on their jerseys? Because they're really blurring the line between like drawn on with like marker or paint and like weird font.
Yeah,
And also their small forward is named Bryson Tiller.
I
kinda good.
know,
He's
dude.
not bad. He's not bad.
No, he's promising. I had to look that up to see whether that was he's related or something.
Yeah. Also, whether that was just like a nickname or something, because I was watching like one of their highlights, either Ausar or man, I can't remember, but like Bryson scored, and I think like they had, I don't know if you guys are familiar with like Agent 00 and like Duke Dennis, like all those, you know how they like
Yeah,
bring
yeah,
guys
yeah.
on to commentate the games.
Yeah.
So
Horrible.
he just
Horrible.
like, I think it's pretty funny actually. But anyway, yeah, wow, Jake, you fucking hate OT.
It's just I mean, like, it's just like so half. I'm not gonna, I'm gonna keep it clean for the children out there. It's just like so phoned in so many ways, and it's just like it's offensive to me that, and I feel like these kids and their families, but especially these kids, like they can't really see the bigger picture at that age, and I feel like
I want to see the salaries of every like working member of the City Reapers. Like, like are the Thompson twins? Because I heard that they're getting a 6-figure salary, which is better than what you'd get in the G League.
yeah.
What are the rest of these guys getting paid?
Dude.
Minimum wage?
No. Something okay. Something okay. I wonder who's propping it up though. Like I'm sure that's publicly available. I have to go in a minute, but you can push back against this, but I think this will be a good way to sort of take the temperature right now where we stand. You're picking at number 3 right now. Who are you taking? No waffling, like
Taking Ausar. And I'll tell you why. I think that I actually think that Ausar is maybe a significantly better prospect than Amen, which is really pushing back against the mainstream narrative. Obviously, hyper athletic, playmaker, 6'7", with this skeleton of an effective jump shot. To me, defensively, he is like, and I know, caveat, it's OTE. Who the fuck is he playing against? He has like like high level center shot blocking ability. Like I think he's averaging almost 2 blocks a game. He's extremely disruptive in the passing lanes. I mean, both of them are like a one-man fast break, but when you put it together, you are looking over your shoulder to see where Ausar Thompson is whenever you make a cross court pass, whenever you reverse the ball, and he comes out of nowhere to swat shots help side. He chase down blocks. If a guy gets past him, he'll just pin their shot against the backboard. He's an elite shot blocker. I don't know if I've seen it's better than like Mikal Bridges level shot blocking from a wing. He's averaging almost 3 steals a game. I think he is very offensively. What I see from him is that he's very decisive off the catch. He loves to flash into open space. Amazing connective tissue touch passer. I think he might be as good of a passer as his brother, but he's able to do it like quickly off the catch, not just on the ball as a point guard, surveying the defense, driving in, and then, pulling in help and then kicking out or hitting a cutter. It's like he is anticipating how the defense is going to react to his off-ball movement, and then he's making a quick decision off the catch, whether to attack, whether to shoot, whether to make a quick pass. And it looks really, really good. He's active on the offensive boards. He's very competitive. And I actually think that his scoring, it's a pretty small sample size, but this is not a part of his game that is fully actualized yet, but there are flashes of real shot creation potential where you see him get into his mid-range bag out of step backs, pull-ups, turnarounds, and his jumper looks a lot more fluid off the dribble, which is something that I noticed with Shea, where when it's stationary, he overthinks it a little bit. It looks very mechanical, and the timing, like the coordination of like the different body parts is not in sync. But when he just gets into it off of a pull-up, or quickly off the catch, or when he has to kind of when he's not in his head about it, it looks a lot more fluid. And I like what I've seen out of his, like, there's just a couple plays where it's so creative, the way that he gets himself open in the mid-range using pump fakes, little step throughs, kind of duck in shots. You don't see a lot of guys with that at this stage. And he's actually said that the reason why he's learned to play off the ball as a cutter, screener, and out of the mid post as a scorer is because he's always played next to his brother and evolved into more of a point guard. And I think that development track bodes well for his ability to fit in at the next level, because I think that he's legitimately able to play. Like we say this about a lot of guys, he is extremely effective on or off the ball. He can be a point guard, he can be a shooting guard, he can be a small forward, he can guard 4 positions. I think that he is a hybrid of like a Ron Harper and a Scottie Pippen.
I really might come around to all of that with Ausar for sure. I just feel like I need to keep watching both of them and see how their productivity progresses as the season goes on. But right now my pick for the third pick is Anthony Black. For all the reasons that I said before. I think he's a better prospect than Brandon Miller, who like we mentioned before, NBA DraftNet has them or has him third overall right now. And if you look at again, I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole, but if you look at like NBA draft.net's description of they'll like write strengths and weaknesses for like every player. And if you watch Brandon Miller and then you like read their description for his strengths and it's honestly really off. Like they paint Brandon Miller as like this transcendent, like generational and it's just not true at all. It's not true. He's a really good shooter. He can't really do much of he's just not a versatile player. He's not that versatile. Anyway.
So Anthony Black, Ausar. I came
I
into
just want to say I don't think Ausar is going to be as good as Scottie Pippen. I think that like
you had to sit with that one. No, I get no.
I think that like I think that the defensive impact is similar to both of them in a way, in terms of the shot blocking reminds me of Scottie Pippen. Definitely the steals and the on ball stuff reminds me of Ron Harper. And I think that just this I think that he actually does project as a good 3-point shooter.
Fair. I'm going to keep it brief. Came into the college basketball season with Cam Whitmore at number 3. I'm going to keep him there. I'll give him another month before I start rethinking it.
Nice. Oh, also we forgot that's cool, Jake. That's a different because he's like, I think he's like slid down some mocks, including NBA draft.net.
What's the comp for Whitmore, out of curiosity? Like, I just before you go, like where are you at with Whitmore's playmaking? He has a very interesting like physical package. Because he's so like broad.
The the Whitmore hype sort of was born out of his shooting performance at Team USA, I think. Because before then he'd been viewed as like, a great athlete with great physical strength. And then he shot well with Team USA. And it's like, okay, well, a good 3-point shooter with that sort of athleticism and strength, that's a really good modern NBA player. I'm having trouble coming up with a comp. I've had to sort of adjust my thinking on him, but I believe in him as an athlete. I think I'm always going to value wings above everything else in the NBA. And I kind of believe the shooting. Like I like his mechanics. So I think he's going to be at worst a really, really, a good starter. And at best, if things come together, it could be a Jaylen Brown type player, someone like that. But stronger.
Yeah. Good stuff, both of you. We also forgot to real quick comp for Gigi Jackson. I came up with a hybrid between Dorian Finney-Smith and OG, but like a worse version.
Yeah, I toyed with the OG, but it's too complimentary of him.
Yeah.
I like the Dorian Finney-Smith. I like the Dorian Finney-Smith because I actually think that he could be he has deep range. And it's obviously inconsistent, but he's also just turned 18. I like the poor man's DeAndre Hunter comparison.
He's Perry Jones the fourth.
Oh yeah, you mentioned that. True.
I feel bad even now saying it. I liked Perry Jones. Like I used to draft him in like my GMs like early on because he had like high potential, and there's a few players like there's some legends like that. Like Bull
I
Brown
remember
being the most
that.
obvious one.
They randomly give players like 90 potential.
Yeah, Nico Mannion always becomes like a mid high 80s point guard. Nico Mannion's now playing in like the second tier in Italy. When you play as like the 1973 Bucks and only like 4 dudes have given their likeness, so like the 5th starter and everyone else on the bench is like John Smith, and it's just like a white dude with like a headband. He's bald.
John Jones.
John Jones.
You gotta show them like the grainy ass photo.
They all have the headband and look like Charlie Villanueva with the fit of like a 80-year-old baller like at the Y.